Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Dennis Prager Show. The left, as in the New York Times and others, are now calling for a reality czar, which in Orwellese, which is what we're entering, is a ministry of truth. See? I try to never, or never to, if you don't want to split an infinitive, exaggerate. When I compare the New York Times to Pravda, that is based on a great deal of thought. That was, if you don't know, the major newspaper, quote unquote, around newspaper of the Soviet Union, is the Communist Party paper, the government paper, which is the same thing, but they had this facade that it was different. The government and the party was Izvestia. So Pravda means truth. Truth is what left declares truth to be, because truth is not a left-wing value. Now do you see that this is coming to fore? But the liberals are still in the twilight zone, thinking that their enemy is conservatives, because they're not true to liberal values. The left is true to left-wing values, the right is true to conservative values, and liberals are not true to liberal values. And that is the essence of the problem in the United States of America. If liberals understood that the left is their enemy, the left would have no power. But courage is not a liberal trait, just like truth is not a left-wing trait. Courage is not a human trait, to be honest. But it's very rare among liberals who have also been brainwashed that the enemy is conservatism. Do you realize what that is? I mean, it's truly astonishing when you think about it. A ministry, what was the name again?
Ministry, Reality Czar.
Reality Czar. Well, he will have a ministry. I mean, not in the sense of a pastor of a church, but in the sense of, for all I know, they would make him a member of the cabinet.
Yeah.
It's quite something to have this.
But it is a ministry of information.
Well, right.
It's
It's a ministry of disinformation. That is right. We're living through unique times in American history. I was thinking about something else the other day. The left lies about unity, as I explained. Most people lie about unity, because everybody who talks about unity wants unity on their terms. I would love America to be united on the values that I hold, but I don't bother calling for unity, because I know what it means. It means that I want everybody to agree with me. So it's generally speaking a disingenuous call. But I was thinking about this, the calls for unity from the left. Oh, God, we resonate. People said it was the greatest inaugural address they had ever heard, which I don't even want to comment on. It's the absurdity is so deep. If you can have such a thing as deep absurdity, it's great absurdity. What is there to unite Americans? I want you to think about that before I answer it. What is there? What exists? We don't share a past. That's huge. That is huge. The left's American past and my American past are not the same. Their simplistic, vile view, well, we had slavery and racism, like it was in some way unique to America. Whereas the freedom that we created in the country, that which was unique to America, that is not spoken of. So we don't have Americanness that unites us. That's been destroyed by the left. And that's why there was such an uproar in this country. There was a perception that the not standing for the national anthem and the flag at a football game was a seminal moment in American history. The people who objected understood that. They were right. Nike and Colin Kaepernick and all the sheep that followed, white and black, they hurt this country terribly. If we can't share the flag, what do we share? So we don't share that. We don't share religion. Half this country has essentially no religion. Some just say, I'm a nun, N-O-N-E, and others just, in some pro forma way, fill out a form and fill in some religion. So we're not united by Judeo-Christian values. And by the way, it doesn't even mean, when I say united by religion, it doesn't even mean the exact same religion. I am a Jew who goes to synagogue on Saturday, but I am at one with Christians who go to church on Sunday. So we don't share. How about this? We don't share a book. We don't share a book called the Bible. We did. That's what Lincoln read every night, even though he was not a churchgoer. We don't share a book. We don't share a faith. We don't share a flag. We don't share a national anthem. What do we share? Nothing. Wonder how a typical 18-year-old, 15-year-old would react to watching old Superman reruns. Truth, justice, and the American way. That is what Superman represented at a time when liberals loved this country. Liberals made up the Superman comic. Then the left took over the Superman comics. And as I reported to you years ago, Superman in one of the comics stood in front of the United Nations and said he was now a world citizen and was renouncing his American citizenship. So what do we share? There are two countries living in the United States. The left took a beautiful experiment in freedom and began ruining it. Now the enemy, if you hear the left speaking, just as there was Al-Qaeda to fight externally, there are Americans to fight internally. Do you realize they're saying this? Domestic terrorism, and they refer to January 6th. A half year or more of utterly destructive riots ignored by the Democrats and the left. Then one moronic invasion, human invasion of the Capitol that defines their opposition. I said then it was the Reichstag fire for the left. The way the Nazis used the Reichstag fire in 1933 to close down dissent in the name of domestic tranquility. All totalitarians are for tranquility when they have shut down the opposition. I would say the nadir, though, was reached. Let me get this exact detail here. I reported it during the third hour yesterday. The nadir of what they have been doing was reached yesterday. And I will, well, I thought I had it right on here. Yes, I do. No, I don't. What is it? Which was it? Facebook? Who shut down the Senate hearing on ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine? YouTube. Yeah. I read to you Ron Johnson, great senator from Wisconsin, his piece in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. You can't even report. Doctors are not allowed to take issue with the NIH. It's called disinformation. Doctors. Meanwhile, YouTube is killing Americans by depriving them of this information.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Ron DeSantis is a Republican, so therefore has to be portrayed as some kind of a yahoo. And Cuomo, who it was literally revealed yesterday, underreported COVID deaths in nursing homes by around 50%, he gets the victory lap. He gets the book deal. He gets the Emmy Award. These clowns, even when they're faced with horrific news, like the Attorney General in New York and her scathing report showing the disastrous response by Cuomo with his mandate that nursing homes must take COVID-19 infected people, which sent thousands and thousands of elderly people to their deaths? Well, here's CNN's take last night. Honest to goodness, this came down at like 8 o'clock at night. Headline by Chris Cillizza, CNN editor-at-large. Analysis. Andrew Cuomo's COVID-19 performance may have been less stellar than it seemed. May have been less stellar. They lied about how many people died in nursing homes because they were desperate to try to cover up Andrew Cuomo's botched response to COVID.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Under oath, Donald Trump incites a terrorist attack, and they have a different standard.
Your assessment of Jake's assessment, Senator?
Well, I think people are being very loose with their language here. The president's been impeached for inciting an insurrection, which has a very technical meaning. But we know that there's a lot of loose language here in Washington, D.C. I think about Chuck Schumer over at the Supreme Court saying that to Gorsuch and Kavanaugh said, "You'll never know what hit you." Maxine Waters telling anti-Trumpers to get in the face of people who support the president. I think we just need to realize that we need to temper our speech here, because there are people who will take it perhaps much farther than anybody ever intended. But I don't believe the president intended to incite violence. I do believe he intended to try to influence the Congress during the certification of the electoral vote. But I don't think you can also impeach somebody for speech that is protected by the First Amendment, which this may well be under Brandenburg versus Ohio.
I've talked about that already, so I won't go over that. What Jake also said, Bill Clinton was impeached while he was in office, and the trial occurred when he was in office. Donald Trump, it's just factually different. And when journalists wade into the law, often they embarrass themselves.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I don't know whether Jake thought that impeachment of Clinton was a good idea or not, or he's just citing that as an example where somebody lies under oath. This is not lying under oath.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Hi, everybody. You're listening to the Dennis Prager Show. I'm going to tell you of an inner debate I have whether to take this call. The living martyr thinks it's a waste of time. The only calls I don't take are when, because I first go to calls that disagree with me, are when somebody says, you said X, and I said not X. I'm not pained by anger at me or hatred or all the bad stuff. It's just part of being a public figure who advocates certain values. You'll receive that. The only thing that bothers me, because of it says the human condition is really in trouble. So there's a call here from a woman in Oregon. You are wrong about Christians and Jews having nothing in common. I have devoted my life to how much Jews and Christians have in common. So I won't take it because somehow or other you so misheard me that you need to reflect on how that happened. And I say that with compassion. But I'd like you now to hear Rand Paul. Sean, what you just played, Rand Paul with the new Secretary of Education. He has courage, Rand Paul. I did not, I was not in his fan club. I was not anti him. But I am now. And it's not just because of what you will hear. It is because of over time. I have seen him as a man of courage. So listen to this. This will go down in history as an example of the decline of America induced by the left. Wow. I salute him, eh? That's right. They're from the planet of the left. The people who want us to have a reality czar. The reality will be that if a boy says he is a girl, he can compete against biological girls and races and win. Depriving the girls of scholarships, depriving the girls of the satisfaction of winning after all the work they put into track. We have a video at PragerU by a girl from Connecticut, a 16-year-old girl who exactly faced that situation. You should watch it. If you think that a transgender girl can run against biological girls in races, then you have been brainwashed so effectively that there is no that. That it means that your mind and soul have been warped. The power of the big lie is beyond what I could have imagined. I wonder if the Soviets could have gotten away with that. If Pravda would have announced that boys who say they are girls can now compete with biological girls, I don't even think Soviet citizens would have bought it. Even in the closed society of the Soviet Union, this country is becoming like the Soviet Union because all leftists are totalitarians and liberals don't give a damn. That's it. In one sentence, would you like to say something? The living martyr would like the microphone.
I think that's a great point. Hadn't thought of that, but when you mentioned it, it made me think of 1984. The climax of 1984 is that the ministry insists that Winston say that 2 and 2 equals 5. And Winston finally says 2 and 2 equals 5. But the ministry says, no, that's not good enough. You must believe it.
That's right.
You have to believe it.
That's
it's
exactly
not
right.
merely, we don't want you to just say it and go along. No, tell us, Winston, 2 and 2 equals. And this is where we are with this, on this particular point. You can't just sign off on it and say, okay, look, fine, they can compete. Just leave me alone. You have to believe it.
You hit it on the nose. That is exactly right. This is the realm not only of the Soviet Union but of China under Mao, where that's why they had re-education camps. It's not enough that you go along with us. You must feel it. The whole question, for example, see, all whites are racist. So here's an interesting question to that. Do all whites act racist? Isn't that what matters? No, not to the left. To the left, they want your feelings and thoughts to conform to what they want. Just like, as you said with Winston at the end of 1984. On Tucker Carlson, he raised an interesting question. Are they still assigning 1984? I'll bet they're not. I bet they're not.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
So let's get right to it. This is a brand new book. How do we turn our seasons around? Because a lot of us are going through tough seasons. I'm going through a slump right now. I'm hitting 220, and that's just not right.
I remember when the media would write me off and say, well, he's having a first half of the season that's not so good. But they forgot I have 82 ball games left. You have a whole second half of your season. Okay, now we've been in the middle of a struggle crisis in this nation, and the season has to turn around. You have to go through a period. We might be going through like 8 months, 9 months, but at the end of the day, we walk into 2021, and you have to think about a fresh outlook. And I think that's what life is really all about. That's just the way God works. God works in some mysterious ways, and he works in your life to meet you right where you're at. And I think we're all in the same boat today. And, for me to have a book that comes out, Turn Your Season Around, we're all going to have to turn our season around. How God transformed your life. He transformed your life if you meet him right where he's at. The thing about it is, what I laugh about, a lot of people say, well, how did you find Jesus? Well, Jesus has never been lost. we are the ones that were lost. We are the ones that have to turn our season around. And he just meets us right in the midst of our season, and he brings us to a greater understanding and the purpose of why he created us. And that's the cool thing about having a relationship with God.
The Bible is full of stories of, the Israelites up against the Red Sea. Their season was over. And then, God turned their season around.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
I often wonder if people have the ability to be objective enough to look at actual data and be truthful about things like the way Democrat-led states have responded to coronavirus and how Republican-led states have done so. For example, Florida. I go a little bit back and forth between the state of Florida and New York, so I get to see how both states are responding to COVID with lockdowns, shutdowns, or some semblance of normalcy. There is a semblance of normalcy in Florida that there is not in New York. So it's really pretty stunning to look at the difference between the way the two states and the two communities really have responded to this pandemic. But have you looked at the data? Because to listen to the mainstream media, Ron DeSantis is just some wild, out of control lunatic who has totally botched Florida's coronavirus response. But Andrew Cuomo, on the other hand, is Mother Teresa and has done everything perfectly, and the numbers are great, and everything's wonderful in New York. And of course, nothing could be further from the truth. If you put on a chart the deaths per capita, the illness, the infection rate, the economy, if you lay it all on a chart and compare Florida to California and New York, it's not even a close call.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
I gotta salute Ron Johnson, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul. If you want to put any of them on, just for me to tell them how much they're appreciated. Yeah. I think it's important. He came. He keeps signaling me, the living martyr. Dennis, it's really time for you to go back on the air. But I was speaking to him, and I was emoting. Anyway, I don't want to take time from my favorite Dane. Wow, that is, now that I think about it, it's really true. Bjorn Lomborg, you are probably my favorite Dane.
Thank you.
Yes, I do. I'm just cracking up. I salute you for coming back on every time I invite you, because you just never know. Remember when I asked you to say happy birthday in Danish, and I ended I ended up at the dentist as a result of trying.
I'm sure that's not true.
No, of course that's not true.
Otherwise, we'd all go to the dentist.
No. Danes have it from birth. Anyway, just for my edification, happy birthday in Danish is?
Tillykke. Or tillykke med fødselsdagen.
All right, there you go. Anyway, I salute you, my friend. You're fighting a good fight. I was reading again your New York Post article, and for those of you who don't know, Bjorn Lomborg is the president of the Copenhagen Consensus Center. He's a visiting fellow at the Hoover Institution. By the way, do they still say Hoover Institution at Stanford, or that sort of dropped?
Yeah, no, Hoover Institution at Stanford University.
Yeah, right. Yep. Okay, just was
right in the center of campus.
Yes, I spoke there many times. His latest book is False Alarm. He he bothers the left because he has no issue with the fact that the Earth is getting warmer. He believes that fossil fuels contribute to the warming, but he sounds the alarm. That's why his book is called False Alarm, with regard to what it would take, for example, to become, what is the Joe Biden anticipation by 2050?
That will be net zero, that you will basically not be using any fossil fuels or emit any greenhouse gases, and the few ones that you will be emitting, you will be compensating by, for instance, sucking them out of the atmosphere as well.
So tell us what is wrong with that ambition.
So, Dennis, there's two things wrong. One is that it's being presented as this end of the world. This is what scares our kids and what makes everyone believe that this could literally be the end of humanity, that global warming is really that dangerous. It is not. And the UN Climate Panel, the gold standard of climate research, tells us so. They tell us that the impact of global warming will be negative, yes, but, say in the 2070s, the cost of global warming will be equivalent of somewhere between 0.2 and 2% of GDP. So that means each one of us will feel 0.2 to 2% less well off than we otherwise would have. But remember, by then, we'll be 363% as rich as we are today. So instead of being 363%, we'll only be 356% as rich as we are today. Yes, that's a problem. No, it's not the end of the world. That matters because if we understand this is not the end of the world, it's a problem, one of many problems we have to fix. We also understand we shouldn't throw everything in the kitchen sink at this problem. We should be careful not to actually waste more resources than the problem that we're trying to fix. And unfortunately, Biden has decided, he's said that he wants to, let's see if that actually happens, he wants to spend $500 billion every year for the next 4 years on tackling climate change. That's 13% of the federal revenue. That's a lot of money. And the net impact will be pretty much zero in terms of impact on global warming. And that's why I'm raising the alarm, simply saying, look, we got to be careful with our resources. It's not like we're flush with money. If we don't spend this money well, it means that we leave the future less well off than it otherwise could have been.
When you present the data, it's just angering. What I have not, and I've read a lot of what you've written, and I may have missed it, or you may simply not have addressed it. So I'll ask you, what is the propelling, what propels people like Joe Biden and others to this suicidal mission of a society that is completely fossil fuel free within 30 years? Bjorn Lomborg is my guest. I'll get his response as soon as we return. $500 billion a year for the next 3 years. We are just, my friends, we are bequeathing to the next generation dollar bills that are monopoly money and debt that makes college debt look like nothing. Well, I got good news, at least on the, if you have pins and needles in your feet or hands and that type of thing, because I did for much of my life. I finally got inserts, which were very, very helpful. And then I read about Nerve Renew, started taking it, and to my shock, within a year, I threw away the inserts that I had been wearing for 10 years. I called Nerve Renew and asked them if they'd advertise. Pins and needles and tingling, they have over 300,000 customers. Go to nerverenew.com. They have a 1-year money-back guarantee. nerverenew.com.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad. Yes, the country with the largest military capabilities, with nuclear weapons, is now back to fighting the climate. Just as I explained to you on a prior program when I was asked to run an exercise with colonels and half-bird colonels from the Obama administration, they, too, half of the cohorts in that exercise, said that the climate was our biggest enemy. Well, here's the new Secretary of Defense. The department will immediately take appropriate policy actions to prioritize climate change considerations in our activities and risk assessments to mitigate this driver of insecurity. So I'm curious, does Secretary Austin, retired general, know what the biggest impact on the weather is, on the climate? Because it's not man-made. Whatever impact man has on the environment is negligible, truly fractal, in proportion to the effect that a large yellow fireball in the sky has on our climate. Yes, the sun, along with the moon a little bit, but mostly the sun, has a larger effect on our environment than anything humans or flatulent cows have.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
You guys are not going to believe what is going on in Illinois right now. Shocking that I have to say that. It's that bad, you guys. It's beyond your wildest belief.
I'm only peripherally aware of this, so please go ahead.
So recently, the Illinois State Board of Education approved this new rule for statewide curriculum mandates called the Culturally Responsive Teaching and Leading Standards. And right now, it's pending before the Illinois General Assembly and will be voted on February 16th to put into all curriculum for K through 12 schools in Illinois. But essentially, it's a new law that forces teachers to, in their words, embrace and encourage progressive viewpoints and perspectives. That's, fancy buzzwords, but what does that actually mean? Essentially, teachers are mandated by law to discuss current political controversies in class. They have to organize what they call action civics, which are field trips, student protests, lobbying expeditions on behalf of causes like gun control or the Green New Deal. They have to admit that there's unlimited numbers of genders and prioritize representation.
All right, y'all. I am with a man whom I have spoken to now for years on the radio, Bjorn Lomborg. He's at the Hoover Institution, and he's president of the Copenhagen Consensus Center. And he knows as much as anyone about the consequences of the policies to combat global warming, or climate change. It has been Orwellianly renamed. I was talking to my producer, a.k.a. The Living Martyr, about his latest book, False Alarm, and when he said something to me, and I said, why don't you say it on the air? Go ahead.
If you're going to read one book on the climate and the issue of global warming, this is the book you should read. It is so reasonable, so well researched. I read the book. I think I read a lot of books. I would say in 2020, False Alarm was either the best or certainly in the top 3 nonfiction books I read last year. So if anybody says to me, and people have asked me many times, what should I read on this issue, I say read False Alarm.
Good. So, happy you came on, Bjorn? Bjorn, are you there? What happened to my dear Bjorn Lomborg? Everything's connected, and we're not hearing him. Okay, we'll have to reconnect.
Can you hear me now?
I hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Do you have any idea what happened?
I have no idea. I was on my headset. So anyway, thank you very much for that endorsement.
You've earned it. It's frightening. So I asked you before, what is propelling people to put the Western world into a form of bankruptcy?
Obviously, I'm not privy to what Joe Biden is thinking, but when I meet with a lot of these people who are really earnestly very, very worried about the world, I think there's a couple of different things. If you look at the news, which is now just overwhelming 24/7, you see one hurricane after another on CNN, and you get the impression that there are just more and more hurricanes. And of course, lots of people will tell you that. They will carefully curate the data such that it looks like this is a catastrophe and it's just getting worse and worse. So you may remember back in 2020, we were told this was the extreme hurricane year. It was a record-setting year. We ran out of names for these hurricanes. Remember, that's because we now have satellites, so we can see all the hurricanes also out in the mid-ocean that never go anywhere. But if you actually look at the power index, so how much damage potential were there in those hurricanes? Yes, the North Atlantic was over the average, but that's to a very large part of El Nino. But the rest of the world was actually vastly under. So overall, 2020 was one of the weakest hurricane years in the satellite history. Yet, you never hear that. You just see one more hurricane, then one more hurricane. So a lot of people get really scared. Then why do politicians say this? Well, politicians have never seen a bandwagon that they don't want to jump on, right? This is basically a way of being able to say, vote for me, I'm going to save you, I'm going to save your kids, I'm going to spend lots of money on different things. And so in that sense, I think the scare campaign that we see now is very much like, if you remember back in the 1970s, we were very worried that there wouldn't be enough food for the world. In the 80s, we were worried about acid rain, the ozone layer. Remember, all of these had some real points, but much of it was just vastly exaggerated. And of course, there was lots and lots of money spent on it that was just wasted. And unfortunately, climate change has the very same tendency as what we've seen over the last 50 years.
So what Bjorn Lomborg explains in his books and his articles, among other things, is, and as soon as one asks this question, I'm now speaking to my audience, Bjorn.
Yeah.
But you're more than welcome to react if you wish. But I've said for all of my broadcast life, the question, "What is the price?" means that you are no longer, and I don't expect you to get political, I'm just telling this to my audience. The question, what is the price, what are the consequences, is a conservative question. It is never asked on the left. What are the consequences of our policies? So that people live in this world of it can be free. So he asks, that's what Bjorn Lomborg asks. He doesn't deny that fossil fuels are making the world warmer. He denies that it's a catastrophe, and he shows what we are spending, how we are hurting the average human being much more by what we're spending than if we don't spend this money. So you gave the data now on hurricanes. I'll bet most Americans believe it was a terrible hurricane year last year. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. And it's also wrong. And it's also, if you look at the actual damage that we see, again, the New York Times had, it was twice as much as last year as in 2019. But that gives you no context whatsoever. What we actually saw was, again, the weather-related damages were on a downward trend, and they've been that for the last 30 years. Moreover, if you look at the people who die from climate-related disasters, so storms, floods, droughts, heat strokes, so on, if you look at all of those people over the last 100 years, the number of people that die have declined from about 500,000 on average in the 1920s to about 8,000 today. It's declined by 98%. And of course, at the same time, we've gotten to be 4 times as many people on the planet. What that tells you is we are not close to an exploding catastrophe. We have a problem, yes. And by all means, let's think about how we smartly fix that problem. But let's stop talking about a catastrophe.
All right. Get his book, False Alarm, and his article is up at DennisPrager.com. I thank you. He's doing great work.
Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
You voted yesterday against proceeding with the impeachment trial. Why?
This is an unprecedented impeachment trial, as you know. Never has it happened before in American history. And there's no clear path forward as in the Constitution or laws themselves. As you know, the Chief Justice is not presiding. The Constitution provides that when the President of the United States is tried in a court of impeachment, the Supreme Court Chief Justice shall preside. So this is kind of like making it up as we go along here, and I have some very serious concerns about the legitimacy of this whole process.
Now, Senator Cornyn, I and Judge Littig and Alan Dershowitz and Professor Turley have argued for weeks now it is unconstitutional to try a former official, and it is not something we want to begin to do. There is one contrary example from the 19th century when a former Secretary of War was tried, but I believe many senators changed their mind about jurisdiction thereafter. Do you believe it's constitutional to try former officials?
Well, as you know, in Federalist 65, Hamilton says that impeachment is really different than anything else, and it's essentially a political process. But I think just from a prudential standpoint, even if you would say that this is permissible, I think it's a terrible idea and a terrible precedent. This means that if a Democratic majority in the House and Senate can try a former Republican president, it means a Republican majority in the House and the Senate could try a previous Democrat president. I think that's a terrible idea, and we shouldn't do it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
So let's get right to it. This is a brand new book. How do we turn our seasons around? Because a lot of us are going through tough seasons. I'm going through a slump right now. I'm hitting 220, and that's just not right.
I remember when the media would write me off and say, well, he's having a first half of the season that's not so good, but they forgot I have 82 ball games left. You have a whole second half of your season. Okay, now we've been in the middle of a struggle crisis in this nation, and the season has to turn around. You have to go through a period. We might be going through like 8 months, 9 months, but at the end of the day, we walk into 2021, and you have to think about a fresh outlook. And I think that's what life is really all about. That's just the way God works. God works in some mysterious ways, and he works in your life to meet you right where you're at. And I think we all in the same boat today. And, for me to have a book that comes out, turn your season around, we're all going to have to turn our season around. How God transformed your life.
The harm being done because of the hysteria of the climate change is morally indefensible. How humans are being hurt. Yes. No, I just since whoa, that was a total accident there. All right, I just want to thank you again. I didn't know you were still on, Bjorn. I just we had to take a break.
I am.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to thank you. We got to do this more often. Your work is truly, as my producer said, is really not duplicated. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Take care. And when I think of what kids are given, have been given by the left, aside from a battery of lies, your past stinks and your future stinks. Isn't that beautiful? The message from the lying, despicable left to our children. That's it. But now we're going to have a ministry of truth, just like Orwell predicted. New York Times is for it. What is it, the official name again? I keep forgetting.
The reality czar?
Reality czar. That's their term, a reality czar. Because the left makes up reality. It doesn't conform to reality. The evil done by YouTube in taking down doctors speaking about the benefits of ivermectin so that more Americans can die of COVID. YouTube is killing Americans, literally. I stake my reputation on this assertion. Okay? And I made a point yesterday which I don't think is refutable. Let's say I'm wrong about ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and zinc. Let's say I'm wrong. So what? So people will take one of the safest drugs available to humanity, taken for the last half century. All right? But if I'm right, then the New York Times and YouTube and the NIH are killing people, have killed over 100,000 Americans by depriving them of therapeutics early on. Just think of that. It's all part of a package. They lie, and because they dominate the media, people believe their lies. I played for you at the beginning. I mean, it's what we're living through. The next Secretary of Education defends the idea that biological men can compete against biological women in sports. Then why have women's sports? Correct? There's no point. If male bodies do not have an inherent advantage in athletics, why are there female teams? That I have to make this case, that this is at all controversial, if that alone doesn't have you have contempt for the left, nothing will. This is the state of our country circa 2021.
Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Under oath, Donald Trump incites a terrorist attack, and they have a different standard.
Your assessment of Jake's assessment, Senator?
Well, I think people are being very loose with their language here. The president's been impeached for inciting an insurrection, which has a very technical meaning. But we know that there's a lot of loose language here in Washington, D.C. I think about Chuck Schumer over at the Supreme Court saying that to Gorsuch and Kavanaugh said, "You'll never know what hit you." Maxine Waters telling anti-Trumpers to get in the face of people who support the president. I think we just need to realize that we need to temper our speech here, because there are people who will take it perhaps much farther than anybody ever intended. But I don't believe the president intended to incite violence. I do believe he intended to try to influence the Congress during the certification of the electoral vote. But I don't think you can also impeach somebody for speech that is protected by the First Amendment, which this may well be under Brandenburg versus Ohio.
I've talked about that already, so I won't go over that. What Jake also said, Bill Clinton was impeached while he was in office, and the trial occurred when he was in office. Donald Trump, it's just factually different. And when journalists wade into the law, often they embarrass themselves.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I don't know whether Jake thought that impeachment of Clinton was a good idea or not, or he's just citing that as an example where somebody lies under oath. This is not lying under oath.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
What do we need to know about COVID that we're not hearing? What is your perspective on it right now? Because there's never been anything so confusing and so strange in my lifetime.
Well, Eric, I agree with you. And this is politics and medicine has no place at all. And unfortunately, the information, the freedom of information for patients so they can make their choices is just not out there. And so the very simple solutions that people should know as a public health editorial is prevention is very important that you can do today. Don't wait for the virus. Don't wait to get the positive test. Just start today with prevention. And there's 5 supplements you can take. There's 5 lifestyle changes that you can do for prevention. Unfortunately, it's not told, but you know what? It works. And we started back in March. We had people make sure they elevate their own immune system by 3 key nutrients. And when they increase their vitamin D levels, they increase their zinc levels, they increase their glutathione levels and vitamin C levels, guess what? These people are more resistant and resilient to all viruses, including COVID. So if they did get the case, it would be reversed quickly, or they didn't get it at all. You know how much this cost? You know, the average person, if the government would have given everybody a $100 kit, I believe that a lot of lives would have been saved with the word prevention. We don't hear that anywhere.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad. Yes, the country with the largest military capabilities with nuclear weapons is now back to fighting the climate. Just as I explained to you on a prior program when I was asked to run an exercise with colonels and half-bird colonels from the Obama administration, they, too, half of the cohorts in that exercise said that the climate was our biggest enemy. Well, here's the new Secretary of Defense. The department will immediately take appropriate policy actions to prioritize climate change considerations in our activities and risk assessments to mitigate this driver of insecurity. So I'm curious, does Secretary Austin, retired general, know what the biggest impact on the weather is, on the climate? Because it's not man-made. Whatever impact man has on the environment is negligible, truly fractal, in proportion to the effect that a large yellow fireball in the sky has on our climate. Yes, the sun, along with the moon a little bit, but mostly the sun, has a larger effect on our environment than anything humans or flatulent cows have.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
You guys are not going to believe what is going on in Illinois right now. Shocking that I have to say that. It's that bad, you guys. It's beyond your wildest belief.
I'm only like peripherally aware of this, so please go ahead.
So recently, the Illinois State Board of Education approved this new rule for statewide curriculum mandates called the Culturally Responsive Teaching.
This is Albert Mohler for Townhall.com. The American experiment is founded upon a presupposition, a prior commitment to an ordered liberty, an established order. That means policies. It means a covenant. In our case, it means a constitution. As of right now, the U.S. Constitution is the longest surviving written constitution in human history. It's a remarkable document. All of that came to the fore in violent events that interrupted the joint session of Congress to count the votes of the Electoral College. At the end of the day, our constitutional order proved itself once again resilient. But that doesn't take away any of the tragedy and the horror of what took place. It was an enormous stress test on ordered liberty, a stress test brought on by the President of the United States.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Dennis Prager Show. I have one of my favorite Americans on the line, and I'm debating how much I can joke with him before we get into serious matters, because it's very hard for me to speak to Eric Metaxas and not start cracking up. It's a problem, actually, which we have engaged in on a number of occasions. Eric Metaxas, for those of you who don't know, is a truly a best-selling author, host of a great radio show called, and I have a little problem with this, he named it after himself, the Eric Metaxas Radio Show. It's on the Salem Radio Network. Eric Metaxas has written a classic, and that's rare, the biography of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the Christian pastor who dissented from Nazism. He was a German, of course, and was executed by the Nazis. The book is a classic. It is a modern classic. And he is now written. It's coming out. When is it coming out, Eric?
Oh, I get to talk now.
Yeah, that was good. That was good. Even that I liked. That's great.
It came out. It came out a couple days ago. I was supposed to be on your show for an hour, and I got kicked to the curb. I don't know. Mitch McConnell stabbed somebody or something. I don't know what happened. That was bigger news than me coming out with this book. But yeah,
there is actually, in significance, your book ranks number one.
Actually, no. Cruz tried to kill that young woman, the Congresswoman.
That's such a good
that
point.
bumped it. Bumped it. You know, Ted Cruz needs to settle down. I mean, trying to murder people. I mean, what is he thinking? That's not going to be good in the long term, really, for his career. Mike, you know, I was just thinking that when you said that we joke around and it's a problem. It is a problem because we can't stop joking even when we both are trying. So I'm going to try hard, but it's just
right. I want you to know, folks, that Eric Metaxas, my wife and I, and another couple, that was it, just 5 of us, were guests in the Vice President Pence's home, in his lovely wife, and his daughter was at the table. And I began the evening, and those of you who have any sense of the now former Vice President know that he is not a knee slapper. So he's a very serious man. But the evening began, and I very straight-facedly looked at the Vice President of the United States and said, "It's an honor to be here, Mr. Vice President, but I just can't figure out why you invited Eric Metaxas."
Unbelievable. Yeah, he couldn't see us coming, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Well, listen, the book that I'm coming out with, you're so kind in your words about my Bonhoeffer book. I've written all these different books. I've never written a book about the story of my life, but I've wanted to for years because people often ask me how I had my God miracle around my 25th birthday, and it's a real story. It's a miracle. God came into my life, blew my mind, utterly, miraculously. I can't make it up. I can't take credit that I reasoned my way to God. He punched a hole in the sheetrock and said, "Hey, I'm out here if you need me," and it changed my life. I mean, literally, I've never been, the same since. But in order to tell the story of what happened then, I kind of have to tell what happened before that. So that happened on my 25th birthday. So I started, writing my story, and it's a crazy story, Dennis. I mean, I am, the son of European immigrants. My dad's from Greece. My mom's from Germany. They met in an English class here in New York City, and their first date was to the Teddy Roosevelt Museum on 20th Street. It's a crazy, beautiful American story, but there's a lot of humor in it. There's a lot of really crazy stories on the way to the despair after graduating Yale. And by the way, that's Yale's job, is to take your parents' money and then to give you hopelessness and meaninglessness, and the good prospects for a job. So it's a crazy book. It's called Fish Out of Water: Search for the Meaning of Life, and there's not a joke. It's not really a joke. It's true. It's the story of my search for the meaning of life. including the question, is there meaning in life, or is life meaningless? Because being at a place like Yale, you kind of get the impression, nobody comes out and says it because they don't have the guts, but that life has no meaning, there is no God, and we'll just try to have a good time in the meantime.
Eric Metaxas' book is Fish Out of Water. It's just coming out this week. A Search for the Meaning of Life, a memoir that is up at DennisPrager.com. So, to be truly and deeply serious, here's an interesting. It's so big, the question, and I'm not expecting you to have even a great answer, but I am curious what you would say to the question: why did God make man?
Well, that's easy. Because God is love. We're talking about the God of the Bible. We're not talking about some New Age,
that's right,
fake divinity. But the God of the Bible is love, and He created us in His image so that He could share His love with us. So creating us was an act of love, and the goal was to have someone like Him to have a love relationship with. I mean, it's like, why do we have kids? Part of that is because we know we will love them, and if we're lucky, they will love us. And there's nothing more beautiful than that. And that's part of the answer of why God created us.
It's a lovely. It is. I mean that not patronizingly. It is a lovely answer, and I buy it. I was on a panel many years ago in Washington, D.C. I was, as you know, the Jew, which you always make hilarious reference to in front of Christian audiences, and I get a big kick out of that. And I was with a Catholic priest and a Protestant minister, and they just, is at a YPO, Young Presidents Organization, meeting in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And they said, we're just going to throw questions at you. They didn't tell us in advance, which is good. I don't like questions in advance. I'm
with you, and neither do I.
I knew you wouldn't. I knew it. We're kindred spirits. So the first question was, why did God create man? And the priest and the minister were truly eloquent. I don't say that often. They were eloquent, and their answers was different from you, and then I'll tell you my answer. Their answers were to glorify God.
Well, that's the cheating answer. Of course, God did everything to glorify Himself, but that's kind of like skipping. That's like showing you the answer, but not showing you the work. Like that's the textbook answer. But okay, go ahead. Yes.
Right? No. That's fine. And then when it was my turn, I said, after these beautiful theologically erudite statements of the pastor and the priest, I'm almost afraid to give you my answer. It will sound so prosaic, but I believe God made us to enjoy life. Now,
He made us so that we could enjoy life.
Yes, so that we could enjoy life, which corresponds in many ways. I don't want to put any words or thoughts into you or your mouth.
No, that goes exactly along with what I said.
Well, right. I mean, if he did create us out of love, do I not want my children to enjoy life? I loved your analogy.
That's right. And if you want them to enjoy life, you're going to give them strict rules so they don't screw that up.
That's right. That's exactly right. Eric Metaxas and I have a great deal in common. I did not know this background, and this is a book, probably my next book, because I read your book on the abolition of slavery and what is it? Wilberforce. I mean, I just enjoy your writing a great deal. So your parents, your father came from Greece, and your mother from Germany. Was your mother in Germany during the war?
Of course, yeah. Yeah, it's all in the book. I actually write their stories at the beginning of the book, and then during telling my story, I kind of weave more of their stories back into it, so you get their stories too, because that's who I am. I mean, my parents, if you're raised by a mother and a father who grew up during the war in these separate locations, but they both experienced the war, both lost their fathers when they were 10 years old, and so the war and that whole experience was my experienced growing up, because their stories and everything about who they are comes out of that, you know. And so I was raised.
So I'll ask
and,
you. Forgive me. We got to take a break, and you know well about breaks. So when we come back, I'm just curious. This is the only reason I'm asking, but it's an interesting question. Did you ever grapple with your mom being in Germany as a German during the war?
This is Lon Chen of the Hoover Institution for townhall.com. The Biden administration announced in their first week that the U.S. is rejoining the World Health Organization. But the WHO is a flawed group, one that has performed poorly while the world has struggled with COVID-19. Early on, the group was far too deferential to China, even parroting Beijing's early claim that the virus could not be transmitted between humans. Since then, an independent panel concluded that the WHO dithered in its response, waiting too long to declare an international emergency. All the while, the WHO has continued to block Taiwan's participation because of political objections from the Chinese government, despite the fact that the world has much to learn from Taiwan's exceptional response to the virus. Before rejoining the WHO, we should have demanded some accountability and reform from the group for the $400 million in taxpayer dollars we send to it each year. It looks like we'll keep on writing blank checks to the WHO, which they are more than happy to keep cashing. I'm Lon Chen.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
We've seen the sausage machine from the inside. Okay. Your verdict on the first 15 days?
Full fail. Absolute, total, utter fail. Economically fail, in terms of PR fail, just a totally pathetic 2 weeks. The fact that Biden's big vaccine plan literally didn't exist. There's no COVID plan. He already said that that there's nothing they can do. So disaster there. Disaster on the Keystone Pipeline. His climate czar is John Kerry, who is literally like a cartoon character of a bad politician. He's a climate czar and has a private jet at the same time. But
it's okay. He said when he flew to Iceland to get the award, he said today, but somebody like me has to have a private jet. I'm going to use that excuse. If I get a private jet, I'm going to say, but someone like me has to have a private jet, Boris. Don't you agree?
He's so fancy, and he's achieved so much in his life. He's been such a high achieving person, you know. After serving in Vietnam, and thanks for his service, buying someone else's medals to throw out, okay?
And then testifying against our nation and the Vietnam War in the Senate.
Being a totally useless senator, a horrible candidate for president, Iran's best friend as Secretary of State, can't even ride a bicycle normally.
Well, but hang on, Boris. He did marry up.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
What we are heading towards will be one of the most violent decades in American history. Why? Massive wealth and income inequality is one reason, because of the lockdowns and because of leaders that do not care about the well-being of their subjects. A war on police officers and a war on law enforcement, and quite honestly, a war on the law in general. And also an unmanaged transition from the corporate boardroom industrial economy to the digital economy. When you have this much economic dislocation, when you have this much disruption, do not be surprised when murder rates and homicide rates skyrocket. New York City is becoming a place
Hi, everybody. I'm Dennis Prager. I want to remind you, because the rates are historically low with regard to refinancing or buying a new home, I salute these guys, Andrew and Todd at andrewandtodd.com with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They have been with me since the beginning of the lockdown, and I get a lot of responses from people about how easy they are to work with and how professional they are. So if you are considering anything, a new purchase, a refi, a cash out refi, a reverse mortgage, just don't wait. Contact andrewandtodd.com. 888-888-1172, 888-888-1172. That is andrewandtodd.com. The book that I'm discussing, Fish Out of Water, A Search for the Meaning of Life, a memoir by Eric Metaxas, is up at DennisPrager.com, out this week. Eric's a serious man and a funny man. It's a great combination. And I really asked a difficult, or perhaps not difficult, but a sensitive question. His parents came from Europe, his mother from Germany, his father from Greece. And she was a German, obviously, and she lived in the Nazi regime, under the Nazi regime in Germany. Did you ever ask her about this?
Oh, are you kidding? Of course. Of course, I grew up with this. This is my, first of all, I got to tell you, I probably said this to you maybe when we talked about Bonhoeffer a long time ago, but of course this is one of those questions growing up, but if you knew my mother, if you knew my grandmother, you'd know that these were just deeply good people, right? So that's the first thing that you say. Because also what's really weird is when you read my book, I talk about the Greeks and the Germans. I got the sense of humor from the Germans. My mother and grandmother, my grandmother never stopped joking. It's the craziest thing. You would never expect this from Germans, but they were like, peasants that tumbled out of a Bruegel painting or something. Just really, I guess because they're from part of the Germany where Luther's from. There's all this kind of jesting and coarse joking or something. But just all of that humor I get from my grandmother, from my mother, which is bizarre. But that's in the book. But I was going to say that, I remember my grandmother said that my grandfather would listen to the BBC with his ear literally pressed against the radio speaker because you could be sent to a concentration camp for listening to the BBC during the war. And they, there's no doubt that he was not on board with what was going on. He managed to stay out of the war until 1943, which is crazy, but he was working in a sewing machine factory and managed to avoid going to war until 1943, and then he was killed on a train heading for the Russian front. It was blown up, and he was killed. He was 31. My mother was 10, and I've lived with this my whole life. But I remember when I was very little, about 5, 6 years old, we lived in an apartment building in Queens. I think we were like the only Gentiles on our floor. I think everybody was Jewish except for us on the floor. And there was an older woman, Mrs. Weingarten, who lived down, and my mother and I would go down, and my mother would talk to her in German. Mrs. Weingarten was a German Jew, and she showed me once the tattoo of numbers on her arm. And my mother explained this to me, And so this has just been part of my whole life growing up. And, I never thought I'd write a book about it, but obviously I thought about it a lot in the last 10 years just because of the Bonhoeffer book. But that's I think you have to deal with that, right? And
of course. And I would have assumed that you would have, which indeed you did. Just for the record, by the way, Bruegel was Dutch, so
no, I know that. But I'm saying I love his painting.
How did they fall out of a Bruegel painting?
What I'm saying is that when you look at one of those paintings,
I'm just giving you a hard time.
I know, but my relatives in Germany, they were kind of that, either peasant stock.
It's hilarious for you to say you got your sense of humor from your German background.
Yeah, it's totally true. I write about it in the book. I'm not kidding.
No, I believe
totally
you. It's just
true.
funny. By the way, did you grow up speaking German and Greek?
Well, yes and no. Because my parents obviously don't speak each other's languages, the common language was English.
Okay.
So I grew up speaking English, but I heard tons of Greek and tons of German, so I can get by in Greek and I can get by in German. I can fool non-native speakers that I'm fluent, and I can fool native speakers for about 3 sentences.
I hear you. Can you say in either language the essence of effervescence is its quintessence?
No.
Okay. That's my test sentence.
Wow.
Yeah.
That I don't think anybody in any language would be able to do that. That would be like really tough. I don't even know if I could do that in English.
What happened at age 25?
God spoke to me in a dream. It was as real as anything. It totally changed my life because I knew without any doubt it was God. I don't want to give it, it's basically the punchline to the story, but it was utterly miraculous, and I needed a miracle, Dennis, because I was so bound up in my own mind. I had been trained at Yale and in the secular culture to be very, very wary of people who believe in the Bible, of evangelical Christians, of anybody who's conservative. I was really inoculated against that. So the whole idea that I could become one of those people who would talk about God or read the Bible, I just thought, I don't want to be one of those people. And yet, I was in a lot of pain after I graduated Yale. My joke version of it is I say that Yale really does communicate to you that life has no meaning. Like, we don't want to get into that. We just want to kind of avoid thinking about the big questions because we don't have any good answers, And so they say, get a good job and just work really hard and don't think about it. And in a few decades, it'll all be over, So I was an English major. I wanted to be a writer. Therefore, obviously, I did not get a good job. So I had plenty of time to think about it. And that's where I went wrong. And so I floundered around. I ended up moving back in with my parents at age 24, which you don't want to move back in with your parents if they're European, working-class European immigrants, because even, your Yale friends, their parents would be like, oh, Eric's trying to find himself. And my parents would be like, well, why don't you find yourself a job and get out of here, because we worked really hard to put you through Yale. So it was a really painful time in my life, and I met a guy who was a profound person who starts sharing about the Bible with me and God and stuff. And I kept him at arm's length during that year as best I could, but I was in so much pain that privately I was kind of wondering, but I was not exactly eager to become one of those people who talks about God and Jesus and whatever. And I got to say that about a year into this, God spoke to me in a dream, and that's the punchline. I won't tell you, but it relates to the title of the book.
We'll be back in a moment. Fish Out of Water, Eric Metaxas' memoir. Back in a moment.
Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Manchin comes on last night and he says very reassuring things. He's not going to screw with the Byrd rule. $15 minimum wage is not in there. We're going to use reconciliation, but if it doesn't have bipartisan support, he's not voting for it. What do you make of that?
Well, I think Senator Manchin is sincere. I had an opportunity to have dinner with him last night, and he's a very honest guy, and he is genuine when he talks about his dedication to bipartisanship. That is a core issue for him, and he very much wants to restore the bipartisan nature of Congress in general and the Senate in particular. And so I'm inclined to take him at his word. I think he feels very strongly about this and feels very strongly that the approach that the Biden administration is taking so early on here is the wrong approach. I mean, pushing through a nearly $2 trillion relief package with no Republican input. It seems like they completely dismissed the group of 10 Republican senators that engaged in good faith earlier this week. I think is the wrong approach, particularly since we don't yet know if the nearly the $1 trillion we spent recently has been fully spent, right? We don't have a sense of what worked, what didn't work. I am on board with the idea of providing more resources for vaccine production and distribution. I think that is the best thing we can do, not only to save lives, but to get us out of this economic mess. But the fact is, we have not spent the full $1 trillion that we passed about a month ago. And I think it would be reckless for us to ram through this purely partisan approach that's going to have a lot of things that are completely unconnected to coronavirus relief in it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I'll circle back if there's more I can share with you. But I'll circle back with you if there's more to convey. I'll have to just circle back with you. We can circle back with you. I'm happy to circle back with you. I can circle back. I will have to circle back on that one. That's an excellent question. Oh, such an important question. We will circle back with you, and we'll circle back with you. It's an interesting question, but we'll circle back. I'm happy to circle back, but I'll have to circle back with you on it. It's a good question, but we'll circle back with you on this today. We will certainly circle back with you more direct.
I think somebody did a count. 73 mentions of circling back by the new White House press secretary. Let's ask somebody who is a communications professional his verdict. He is the co-host of our special podcast, The Battle for 1600. We've just recorded episode 49. Check it out now. Subscribe. We go into more detail, a little bit more spicy, lots of fun. He is, of course, the Baron. Boris Epstein. That's pretty perfect. 73 she must be dizzy by now.
I'm going to have to circle back to you on that.
No, you dare. This is my show. No circling back.
Maybe she's circling. Who knows? It is very disappointing. I think it is beneath the office that Jen Psaki holds to be acting as she has, and I think it's portraying weakness abroad, and that's the last thing we want to have is weakness as the United States of America portrayed to our adversaries and, frankly, to our allies.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
I ask you, those of you who engage in that stupid thought experiment after the Capitol riot, well, suppose they had been black. I got a phone call from my daughter, and my granddaughter, and she said, Pop, suppose they had been mostly black. And Biden says, nobody could tell me that the response would not have been different. Okay, nobody can.
Hello, my friends. Dennis Prager here with Eric Metaxas, my colleague and friend. Fish Out of Water, A Search for the Meaning of Life. You know how that resonates with me, but it also resonates that the author is Eric Metaxas. It's out this week. It's his memoir. It's a pretty early age to write a memoir.
Well, it's only a memoir. First of all, you act like I'm a kid. I wish I were, but it's only the first 25 years of my life, and a lot of it is, as I said earlier, it's funny. I think it makes a good read, even if you're not interested in the meaning of life, just because there's it's just a lot of interesting, crazy stuff. Some of the jobs I had while I was in college, you won't believe when you read them. You won't believe it, but every syllable is true. I hate when people embellish or when they kind of stretch the truth to make the story better. I just hate that. And so it's all true, and I think it makes a good read. It's kind of literary in some ways, especially toward the end. And I would say, Dennis, I wrote this book even though I expect people who are on our page about God, about, the country, whatever, they will, of course, love the book. But I really wrote it so that they could give it to people who do not agree with us, people who are not on the same page, because it's not a political book, but I think it will help people understand a bigger picture about maybe good and evil. I talk about, growing up with parents that they taught me to hate communism, that this was basic. And I remember when I was around kids whose parents were Americans, which a little bit when I was in fifth grade, we moved to Connecticut, and suddenly I'm not around immigrants so much because I went to Greek Orthodox parochial school in Queens before that. So suddenly I'm around these American kids, and I realized that they didn't have a sense of patriotism or whatever. It wasn't the same as mine because my parents really taught me that, my mother was in East Germany. It became East Germany after the war. And my father had seen the communists in Greece after the war. There was a civil war there with the communists. And so they really taught me to hate communism and to love freedom. And without really trying, they taught me that. And so I had this sense of good and evil that I think a lot of Americans didn't have or don't have because we've had it so good here. You think, how bad could things get? We're going to increase my taxes or, how bad could it get? They don't know how bad it could get, but my parents did, and they instilled that in me, and that's I think, a big part of my story.
If I were to write a column, I write a column every week, but if I were to write a column on the contemporary American condition, you gave me the title. They don't know how bad it could get.
Well, it's funny because I wrote an op-ed for Town Hall, and I said, the question was, are Americans naive, or why are Americans naive about evil? And I talk about my parents and that whole thing in the column, and one of the lines, I think, is, that they don't know how bad it can get. They don't. Let's face it. They do not understand how horrible it can get. The worst they could imagine is like New York in the 70s, like crime and whatever. It's like, we've seen some of that.
By the way, I'd
stuff.
like you to read my column of last month, The Good German.
I did. Of course I did. And we talked about that on the phone, and I went and read it. Now, of course, I'm not remembering every detail.
No, I'm happy to repeat it. It's an unhappy subject, but I'm happy to repeat it for my listeners' sake as well as yours. And only because I asked you about your mom and Germans.
Yeah.
That I have undergone a sea change in the last year, which I very rarely do.
Yeah.
If I have a change of mind, it's something that brews over a decade or something. But I realized that this instinctive contempt one held for the German who did nothing,
right?
Who didn't do anything against Jews and did nothing against the Nazis.
Yeah, like Daniel Goldhagen's book.
Well, that's right. Yes. Okay. He basically depicted people who did a lot, but the general trend was the good German is a mocking phrase. But I realized as our liberties diminish by the day in the United States, that Americans do not have to face a Gestapo, do not have to face a KGB, and they're quiet. So I had an instant, and it's remained with me, understanding of, hey, the good German had a lot more to fear speaking up than an American has to fear speaking up. And
that's it.
Look at how many Americans are not speaking up as liberties are decimated on a daily basis in this country. Eric Metaxas' book is up at DennisPrager.com. Fish Out of Water, The Search for the Meaning of Life. Relief Factor is one of the easiest products I've ever had to advertise, not only because it works, but because so many people need it. As people get older or just exercise too much or whatever reason, they have pain in their joints, pain in their muscles. This does not work on nerve pain. This works on muscle pain, and it works. And they have a very interesting offer. They tell you if it doesn't work in 3 weeks, it probably won't work for you. That's how quickly it works. So they have a special price for a 3-week trial, $19.95. Go to relieffactor.com or call 800-500-8384, relieffactor.com.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
What we are heading towards will be one of the most violent decades in American history. Why? Massive wealth and income inequality is one reason, because of the lockdowns and because of leaders that do not care about the well-being of their subjects. A war on police officers and a war on law enforcement, and quite honestly, a war on the law in general. And also an unmanaged transition from the corporate boardroom industrial economy to the digital economy. When you have this much economic dislocation, when you have this much disruption, do not be surprised when murder rates and homicide rates skyrocket. New York City is becoming a place that is completely unrecognizable. Just some of my buddies in Chicago that I grew up with said they do not feel comfortable going to downtown Chicago. They feel their car will almost assuredly be carjacked, or whatever is in their car will be stolen. When I was in San Francisco, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, parked on the side of the street, nice part of San Francisco, everything we had in there completely and totally stolen. Windows smashed, all of our stuff stolen. Do not be surprised when civil society starts to unravel, when you attack every single core institution that keeps civil society together.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
2020 was the largest percentage increase in homicides in American history. Murder was up nearly 37% in a sample of 57 large and medium-sized cities. Based on preliminary estimates, at least 2,000 more Americans, most of them black, were killed in 2020 than in 2019. You would think that would be a heavy focus or primary focus for the ruling class media. The local murder increases in 2020 were as following: 95% in Milwaukee, 78% in Louisville, 74% in Seattle, 72% in Minneapolis, 62% in New Orleans, and 58% in Atlanta. A lot of people blame it just purely on the pandemic stress. Do you not remember?
Hello, everybody. Dennis Prager here with Eric Metaxas. My colleague has got a great radio show, and he's a wonderful writer. The new book is his memoir, Until Age 25, when he simply states God appeared to him. It's titled Fish Out of Water. So anyway, now you recall what I wrote about the good German. Oh, I have to put you on. That'll help. All right.
Paul, and it's something I think about every day because Mike Lindell times 1,000, have experienced what it is to suddenly be on the wrong side of something and to have everybody look the other way and say, well, we don't want to get involved. We don't want to get involved. Like the Kitty Genovese story, which you'll remember. People just, they don't want to get involved. And you think, folks, if there's any question that our election wasn't on the up and up, even if you don't believe it, don't you think that this is something that we have to address? Because you cannot have an America unless everybody's convinced that their vote counts, that the institutions can basically be trusted. And even to bring this up at this point gets you blocked on YouTube, on Twitter. Mike Lindell has gone through hell, and I think to myself, why? Why are they persecuting him Is this so evil? What has he done? It is, to see this happening in my America, in the greatest nation in the history of the world, is a lesson to us all about the so-called good German. Because you've got corporate America, they would happily do business with the Nazis if they could make money. They have absolutely no compunction about helping China, trading with China. So what if China is torturing or killing Uyghur Muslims? That's not our business. We just want to, make more money, and if we don't make it, somebody else will make it. So we'll do business with anybody. And corporate America is, to my mind, the biggest disappointment, because if they stood strong for liberty, for free speech, for whatever it is, the rest of us would, be proud of them, and we would all stand a chance. But when corporate America says we're going to cancel you if you say the wrong thing, we've now determined that if you even bring it up, you're probably a violent white nationalist. That's America today, and I've been talking about this a lot recently, because I thought to myself, all the people who say, well, if I was in Germany, I would not have participated with that. But you're participating with it now. Right now you are.
And not with the possible punishment of being sent to Dachau.
Well, I mean, look, that was later. We know that we didn't get to the point where you could get sent to Dachau if people hadn't shut up when they weren't going to be sent to Dachau. They just thought, I don't want my neighbor to look at me funny. I don't want to be reported. I don't want to lose business. Maybe people will stop coming into my shop and I'll lose everything. That's what, they had a Bed Bath & Beyond and H-E-B stores and Kohl's. All of these corporations made a decision that, we don't want to get targeted as white nationalist or conservative, so we're going to throw Mike Lindell under the bus. Why? What has the guy done? Absolutely nothing. He's trying to look into election fraud. It's just one of these things that you think, this is America. Even if people say things you don't agree with, we're supposed to stand up for our right to say it, right? The Nazis marched through Skokie, Illinois, outside of Chicago, and the ACLU stood up for them because they said,
by the way,
hate them.
So did Jewish groups.
Well, that's the point. We believe in free speech in America. We believe in freedom. We know that's gone, and you should make a film about it called No Safe Spaces.
I'm definitely going to give that consideration.
Think about it.
Adam Carolla to
yes, he'd be good if you can't get me, and you can't.
Yeah, no, that's a very fair statement.
I think about this a lot, Mike. But that's part of the book.
By the way, why were people allowed to say that there was Russian collusion with the Trump campaign and lie about that for 3 years?
Well, but I'm saying this is the point: is that what the worst example of this was when I really, really woke up. I've been awake on this, but what really blew my mind was when they suppressed the Hunter Biden laptop stuff. I thought to myself, I've never seen anything this in my life.
That's right.
Where you have an outrageous story by any standard.
That's right.
That ought to be covered. We're actually wondering, is it possible the guy who might be president is somehow compromised with our arch enemy, the evil, wicked, communist Chinese who don't believe in anything that we believe over here? Wouldn't that be newsworthy? Not only wasn't it newsworthy for some, no one was covering this in the mainstream media. And when I saw that, I thought they have the ability, we've given them the ability to control information. How is that different than living in Goebbels' Germany? I mean, if you don't have access to the truth, how can you make decisions? That is when I really thought, wow, this is stunning. But look, we know big tech, they are using their muscle. It's madness for them to be able to talk about Russian collusion for years and still talk about it. And we know that it's nonsense. We actually know that it's nonsense.
Let me tell you
here we are.
Another story, a brief one, about a turning point that I had this last year. 2020 was revelation after revelation, all negative. So, dear friends of mine live in Santa Monica, California, and there were big riots there, despite the fact, or maybe because of the fact, that it's run by leftists. And they told me to go to a store on a major avenue, and which was boarded up like all the stores. and see what was written on it. So I went to the address they gave me. It's on a major commercial street in Santa Monica. And on the boards of the boarded up store were the words black owned.
There you go.
And I thought, wow, why isn't that the same as Aryan owned?
Well, right.
In the 30s in Germany. Pretty bad stuff. Yep. Final segment coming up with Eric Metaxas. So Eric and I are sort of a living example of Judeo-Christian. His book is his memoir, Fish Out of Water, just out this week. It's up at DennisPrager.com. Back momentarily.
Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Manchin comes on last night and he says very reassuring things. He's not going to screw with the Byrd rule. $15 minimum wage is not in there. We're going to use reconciliation, but if it doesn't have bipartisan support, he's not voting for it. What do you make of that?
Well, I think Senator Manchin is sincere. I had an opportunity to have dinner with him last night, and he's a very honest guy, and he is genuine when he talks about his dedication to bipartisanship. That is a core issue for him, and he very much wants to restore the bipartisan nature of Congress in general and the Senate in particular. And so I'm inclined to take him at his word. I think he feels very strongly about this and feels very strongly that the approach that the Biden administration is taking so early on here is the wrong approach. I mean, pushing through a nearly $2 trillion relief package with no Republican input. It seems like they completely dismissed the group of 10 Republican senators that engaged in good faith earlier this week. I think is the wrong approach, particularly since we don't yet know if the nearly the $1 trillion we spent recently has been fully spent. Right? We don't have a sense of what worked, what didn't work. I am on board with the idea of providing more resources for vaccine production and distribution. I think that is the best thing we can do, not only to save lives, but to get us out of this economic mess. But the fact is we have not spent the full $1 trillion that we passed about a month ago. And I think it would be reckless for us to ram through this purely partisan approach that's going to have a lot of things that are completely unconnected to coronavirus relief in it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I'll circle back if there's more I can share with you. But I'll circle back with you if there's more to convey. I'll have to just circle back with you. We can circle back with you. I'm happy to circle back with you. I can circle back. I will have to circle back on that one. That's an excellent question. Oh, such an important question. We will circle back with you, and we'll circle back with you. It's an interesting question, but we'll circle back. I'm happy to circle back, but I'll have to circle back with you on it. It's a good question, but we'll circle back with you on this today. We will certainly circle back with you more direct.
I think somebody did a count. 73 mentions of circling back by the new White House press secretary. Let's ask somebody who is a communications professional his verdict. He is the co-host of our special podcast, The Battle for 1600. We've just recorded episode 49. Check it out now. Subscribe. We go into more detail, a little bit more spicy, lots of fun. He is, of course, the Baron. Boris Epstein. That's pretty pathetic. 73 she must be dizzy by now.
I'm going to have to circle back to you on that.
No, you don't.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dennis Prager. Not many people I have a whole hour with. That gives you an idea of the esteem I hold this man, Eric Metaxas, and his memoir, Up to Age 25. Volume 2 will be between 25 and 27. And eventually his memoir will be the size of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Is that sort of the ambition?
No. My next book, the sequel to this, is called Pastures New, A Life in Miracles. And that is the story, it's kind of the next 25 years where I really tell about what happened after God came into my life. And I have had many bona fide miracles. I've written about a few of them, but I thought I need to just tell those stories because people need to know God is real. He's alive. He hears our prayers, and sometimes he does things to blow our minds. He parted the Red Sea. That actually happened. That's not a myth. When it happened, people didn't say, "Nah, that's interesting." They were stunned, and they are talking about it to this day. And that was God's point in doing that. And so people need to know that. And so I'm here to testify, so to speak.
You live in Manhattan?
I do.
Is it lonely?
Is it lonely? Not really, because I have a wife now and some friends. Actually, we've been married for almost 25 years, and we associate with people who are as insane as we are. We're patriots.
Right. So you found kindred spirits.
Well, there's more than a few, and of course, that we couldn't survive without that.
Right.
And,
exactly. I'm only saying that because on my happiness hour a couple of weeks ago, that was the theme of the entire hour. That without kindred spirits, I don't see how one can maintain any resemblance of normalcy at this time.
Well, listen, if my wife weren't on the same page, I'd have jumped out the window by now because this is just madness we're living through. And my sweet parents, who are still living in Connecticut, where I grew up, we visit them whenever I get the chance. And I thank God that they're on the same page, because and my sweet brother John is on the same page, and his wife, because this is tough stuff. But hey, if I'm crazy, I'd like to know, and then I won't believe this stuff. But as far as I know up to this point, unfortunately, what we believe is true. Or fortunately, whatever, depends on what part I'm talking about.
I am pleased, happy to be one of your kindred spirits.
You certainly are. And I want to reiterate that the book that is coming out now, it's a real melange. A lot of it is very funny, crazy immigrant stuff, but at the end, when I get to the Yale stuff and after, it gets serious. I don't think it's maudlin, but it gets serious about
Good, and as that's the perfect combination of who you are. Folks, the book is up at DennisPrager.com. Fish Out of Water, Eric Metaxas. Thank you, my friend.
This is Lon Chen of the Hoover Institution for townhall.com. The Biden administration announced in their first week that the U.S. is rejoining the World Health Organization. But the WHO is a flawed group, one that has performed poorly while the world has struggled with COVID-19. Early on, the group was far too deferential to China, even parroting Beijing's early claim that the virus could not be transmitted between humans. Since then, an independent panel concluded that the WHO dithered in its response, waiting too long to declare an international emergency. All the while, the WHO has continued to block Taiwan's participation because of political objections from the Chinese government, despite the fact that the world has much to learn from Taiwan's exceptional response to the virus. Before rejoining the WHO, we should have demanded some accountability and reform from the group for the $400 million in taxpayer dollars we send to it each year. It looks like we'll keep on writing blank checks to the WHO, which they are more than happy to keep cashing. I'm Lon Chen.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
We've seen the sausage machine from the inside. Okay. Your verdict on the first 15 days?
Full fail. Absolute, total, utter fail. Economically fail. In terms of PR, fail. Just a totally pathetic 2 weeks. The fact that Biden's big vaccine plan literally didn't exist. There's no COVID plan. He already said that that there's nothing they can do. So disaster there. Disaster on the Keystone Pipeline. His climate czar is John Kerry, who is literally like a cartoon character of a bad politician. He's the climate czar and has a private jet at the same time. Doesn't.
But it's okay. He said when he flew to Iceland to get the award, he said today, but somebody like me has to have a private jet. I'm going to use that excuse. If I get a private jet, I'm going to say, but someone like me has to have a private jet, Boris. Don't you agree?
He's so fancy, and he's achieved so much in his life. He's been such a high achieving person. You know, after serving in Vietnam, and thanks for his service, buying someone else's medals to throw out, okay?
And then testifying against our nation and the Vietnam War in the Senate.
Being a totally useless senator, a horrible candidate for president, Iran's best friend as Secretary of State, can't even ride a bicycle normally.
Well, but hang on, Boris. He did marry up.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
What we are heading towards will be one of the most violent decades in American history. Why? Massive wealth and income inequality is one reason, because of the lockdowns and because of leaders that do not care about the well-being of their subjects. A war on police officers and a war on law enforcement, and quite honestly, a war on the law in general. And also an unmanaged transition from the corporate boardroom industrial economy to the digital economy. When you have this much economic dislocation, when you have this much disruption, do not be surprised when murder rates and homicide rates skyrocket. New York City is becoming a place that is completely unrecognizable. Just some of my buddies in Chicago that I grew up with said they do not feel comfortable going to downtown Chicago. They feel their car will almost assuredly be carjacked, or whatever is in their car will be stolen. When I was in San Francisco, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, parked on the side of the street, nice part of San Francisco, everything we had in there completely and totally stolen. Windows smashed, all of our stuff stolen. Do not be surprised when civil society starts to unravel, when you attack every single core institution that keeps civil society together.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
2020 was the largest percentage increase in homicides in American history. Murder was up nearly 37% in a sample of 57 large and medium-sized cities. Based on preliminary estimates, at least 2,000 more Americans, most of them black, were killed in 2020 than in 2019. You would think that would be a heavy focus or primary focus for the ruling class media. The local murder increases in 2020 were as following: 95% in Milwaukee, 78% in Louisville, 74% in Seattle, 72% in Minneapolis, 62% in New Orleans, and 58% in Atlanta. A lot of people blame it just purely on the pandemic stress. Do you not remember the defund the police narrative that swept our country for months? And Minneapolis basically did defund their police. One of the reasons why some of the police officers in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol tragedy did not have lethal weapons is because some of them were disarmed by Muriel Bowser, the mayor of Washington, D.C.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
You know what I can't get out of my head? Why doesn't this woman wear a mask? They're all so mask friendly in the White House now. Biden is often behind the Resolute desk with his mask on in the Oval Office. You know, you hardly see Biden.
Hello, my friends. I have a difficult, and I mean it, it's emotionally difficult question to ask. But I can't think of a reason to think that my question is not valid. And maybe some of you think that it isn't valid, and I would be obviously open to hearing that. So this poor gentleman, the police officer at the Capitol who died, we don't know if he was killed, which is another issue that I will address in a moment, is lying in state at the U.S. Capitol. And I know the reason. The reason is not that he is unworthy of honors, but many who die in service to this country are not, 99.9% are not, do not lie in state. This is all propaganda on the part of the left to continue to use January 6th as the center of attention of the country as if it were, quote unquote, an insurrection. Be the most absurd insurrection in the history of insurrections. Of course, it wasn't an insurrection. It was just a stupid and destructive mini riot, the types of which we saw daily, much worse in Portland and elsewhere for more than half a year, and which is overwhelmingly neglected in the mainstream left-wing media. So why is he lying in state? It's just to highlight the continuing obsession that we should all have with January 6th. So he was supposedly killed, right, wasn't the original report with a fire extinguisher?
He was hit by a...
Hit by a fire extinguisher.
From a protester.
So everybody was told, and I think the source was CNN, and it turns out probably he was not killed by somebody hitting him, or even at all by a fire extinguisher. Even CNN has an article up yesterday. Investigators struggle to build murder case in death of U.S. Capitol Police officer Brian Sicknick. I read the article and I don't quite understand why the autopsy has not been made public. And my theory is that there is such deep control of every aspect of society in any Democratic Party-controlled city that it even applies to the coroner's office. That's my most logical inference to be drawn here. The autopsy may not have accorded with the left's propaganda that he was murdered by a protester, and therefore the autopsy results have not been made available. If you have another reason why the autopsy results in a national case have not been made available, I would be very interested to hear it, if it makes any sense. So he's lying in honor. This began Tuesday evening. Congressional leaders announced late last week bestowing on him a sacred tribute that's typically reserved for dead American political leaders. This is all, his death is being used to serve the latest excuse to clamp down on Americans' rights, and that is that there are internal terrorists that have to be fought like Al-Qaeda. That means, who is an internal terrorist? White nationalist. Who is a white nationalist? Anybody who supported Donald Trump. Basically any Republican, anyone who opposes the left. White nationalist. Can you be a black nationalist? What does white nationalist even mean? The only time I ever heard the term was from the left. They make these things up. It's been done by the left since Lenin. You make up things about your enemies. You have the media to back up your claim, and it works. We're in a very serious situation with regard to liberty in this country, because anywhere the left takes over, liberty declines. There is no exception to that on earth. Never has been. I wonder what they'll do about homeschooling, because it's something to keep your eye on. Germany does not even allow it. Doesn't seem to bother Germans, for whom, like now, at least half of America, liberty is not a particularly important subject. Being taken care of, that's what are Europeans proud of? Ask most Europeans, what are you most proud of? And they will tell you the social welfare state. They're most proud of the fact that people get a lot from the state. What percentage of Western Europeans, or now, well, Eastern Europeans is a somewhat different story. What percentage of Western Europeans would answer, we are most proud of the fact that we live in a free country? Interesting question, no? I would say less than 1%. What are you most proud of? Americans would have said, until recently, we're most proud of the fact that it's the land of the free, that it's a free country. That is our self-definition. By the way, the way you define yourself is the way you will act. As a general rule, that is the way it works. If you see yourself I really see myself as telling the truth, that defines me. There's a good chance that you will tell the truth more than otherwise. People can fool themselves, and many do, but generally speaking, that is the way it works. When you regard your country as the citadel of freedom, then by golly, you'll be a freer country. But it is inconceivable to me, and I've been to every European country except Macedonia. A lot of European countries. I've been to every single one. And you ask a German, I mean, forget, smaller countries, although it wouldn't matter, smaller country would, but ask someone in Spain, ask someone, France, Germany, the biggest countries. What characteristic are you most proud of your society? They will say, it takes care of me, and or takes care of others. Some aspect of being taken care of. Not freedom. They don't have talk radio in Europe. Whenever I've had European guests, very often I would end the conversation, or somewhere in the conversation I would say, the great difference between Europe and the United States is talk radio. And they all said that is correct. And they will come after talk radio too in the United States, because there's no example of the left allowing alternate voices. God, I remember like yesterday, I mentioned this to you, during the Bush era, living in Southern California with a lot of people on the left. So it was much more popular then to have bumper stickers than today. And I would almost every day, I would say I saw at least one car with "Dissent is patriotic" written on the sticker. And then the moment Barack Obama was elected, the stickers went off. I think they took the stickers off on election night. Dissent is not patriotic when the left is in power. Dissent is white nationalism. That is what is being done now. That is what is being said. And if, again, you say it enough, like with Winston in 1984, You not only have to say 2 and 2 is 5, you have to believe it. That's right. That's why they accuse all whites of being racist. It's a big difference. First of all, it's a lie. It's a gigantic libel. It's one of the largest libels in human history. But aside from that, that's not the question to be asked. The question to be asked is, do whites act racist? I'm a Jew. If in your heart you're not a big fan of Jews, I don't give a damn. I care how you treat Jews. We'll be back.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I'll circle back if there's more I can share with you. But I'll circle back with you if there's more to convey. I'll have to just circle back with you. We can circle back with. I'm happy to circle back with you. I can circle back. I will have to circle back on that one. That's an excellent question. Oh, such an important question. We will circle back with you, and we'll circle back with you. It's an interesting question, but we'll circle back. I'm happy to circle back, but I'll have to circle back with you on it. It's a good question, but we'll circle back with you on this today. We will certainly circle back with you more direct.
I think somebody did a count. 73 mentions of circling back by the new White House press secretary. Let's ask somebody who is a communications professional his verdict. He is the co-host of our special podcast, The Battle for 1600. We've just recorded episode 49. Check it out now. Subscribe. We go into more detail, a little bit more spicy, lots of fun. He is, of course, the Baron. Boris Epstein. That's pretty pathetic. 73 she must be dizzy by now.
I'm going to have to circle back to you on that.
No, you dare. This is my show. No circling back.
Maybe she's circling. Who knows? It is very disappointing. I think it is beneath the office that Jen Psaki holds to be acting as she has, and I think it's portraying weakness abroad, and that's the last thing we want to have is weakness as the United States of America portrayed to our adversaries and, frankly, to our allies.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
I ask you, those of you who engage in that stupid thought experiment after the Capitol riot, well, suppose they had been black. I got a phone call from my daughter, and she's my granddaughter, and she said, Pop, suppose they had been mostly black. And Biden says, nobody could tell me that the response would not have been different. Okay, nobody can tell me that America's response would not be different if President Barack Obama were impeached based upon these bogus grounds and then faced a trial after he left office and the judge presiding over the trial dislikes him to the point where he already voted to convict and expel him from office on account when not a single Republican joined. America would be on fire, and you know it. How many times did somebody get accused of being racist simply because they opposed a policy by Obama? Now, the new lawyer, his name is Dave Schoen, says, look, here's what we're going to say. We're going to say this whole thing is unconstitutional, and it is. There shouldn't be a trial, and there shouldn't. We don't have jurisdiction. Court doesn't have jurisdiction, and they don't. But he also made the point that I made from the very beginning, and that is if Joe Biden really wanted to heal, really wanted to reach out, pick up the phone, call Schumer and say, call off the dogs because this is stupid.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Country, but I want to ask you, going back to Biden, there was an episode in the first or second season of The Crown where Churchill is quite sick. And his number two, I guess, Anthony Eden, the foreign secretary, is also quite sick. You have a constitutional issue. If you do not have a healthy president in our country.
Okay, everybody, I want to remind you that taking hundreds of you to Israel this coming October. Israel will certainly, unless something unforeseeable happens, will certainly be opened at that time, and you will want to be with hundreds of your kindred spirits. It's worth it for. Here's my argument: it's worth it for Israel. It'll blow your mind. It is worth it for me, because you obviously wouldn't come if you didn't enjoy me. And it is, in my view, as much as anything worth it because of the people you will meet, because of you might as well call it the Kindred Spirit Tour. It's up at DennisPrager.com, the banner, Stand with Israel banner. And, of course, taking my annual cruise is scheduled for June. And that, too, is up at DennisPrager.com. There is a profile in courage in this country named Rand Paul. He was talking to the next Secretary of Education. No, is that right? Education. So, Sean, if you could prepare that, the Rand Paul exchange. It is literally incredible. It is hard to believe what the left has asked us to accept as reality when you listen to this.
Gender, and that they are afforded the opportunities that every other student has to participate in extracurricular activity.
Does it bother you that like the top 20% of boys running in track meets beat all of the girls in the state, and that it, would be, completely destroy girls' athletics? The girls are being pushed out. They don't make the finals in the state meet. They don't get college scholarships. That it's really detrimental to girls' sports. Do you worry about having boys running girls' track meets?
I recognize and appreciate the concerns and the frustrations that are expressed. As Commissioner of Education, have had conversations with families who have felt the way you just described it, and families of students who are transgender. So I understand that this is a challenge. I look forward to working with you and others to.
Do you think it's fair to have boys running in the girls' track meet?
I think it's appropriate I think it's the legal responsibility of schools to provide opportunities.
All right. So he just kept on with this, and Rand Paul has guts because, of course, he will be described as a hater. Why doesn't the left hate girls? That's more logical. By the way, nobody is denying the transgender the right to participate in sports. Even that's a lie. They just can't participate as girls. Of course they can participate. Because sports, biology matters. In daily life, it doesn't matter as much in the sense that if you identify as a female, look female, have a female name, dress female, I'll address you as a female. That's just courtesy. But I'm not going to let you cheat. That's cheating when you run with the male body against female bodies. It's called cheating, okay? That's what it is. There is no other word for it. The left is despicable, and if you don't recognize that, it is because you are afraid to. All of my life, I have warned that evil is not dark. It's easy to look into the dark. Evil is bright like the sun, and it's very hard to look at it. It is so much easier to deny how evil the left is. You don't pay any price You don't pay a psychological or emotional price. You don't pay a price in terms of people you will alienate. But while there is still freedom in the United States of America, you better speak up. Because one day, at the rate we are going, there will not be the freedom of people like me to say what I'm saying. Let me ask you a question. You think if there were a vote in the U.S. Senate or the U.S. House, shall we shut down conservative radio or not? How do you think the vote would go? It's a rhetorical question. So they have dismissed this congresswoman from committees. Is that correct? Is that the way it works? Mm-hmm. So this is another. I don't know if this has happened before. Has a congressman been dismissed from committees for what they said prior to their even running for office? Is he? So when the Republicans get a majority, will they?
S of House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device.
Okay. What was the vote number? Do we have the vote number? 218 to 209. So another barrier to totalitarian control has been removed. It's quite something what we are watching, but it happens incrementally, and so people go on with their daily life, which doesn't seem to be much affected. Most people don't use freedom in any event. They just if the country were in fact a dictatorship, most American lives would not differ much from today. You'd still go to work. You'd still watch your sports. You'd still watch your movies. You'd still get on Netflix. That's the human condition. This is what This is what we have to address. I was pausing for a moment because I was debating. I had an inner debate. Does this surprise me or not? And I'm really, it's a mixed bag because I've always said to you the left is totalitarian. That's just definitional. If you're on the left, you're not totalitarian, you're a liberal. And nevertheless, I can't sit back and say, I expected this. The speed with which America is losing its liberty is breathtaking. The acceptance by half of America of its happening, that's depressing. That's why I wrote my columns, The Good American and The Good German. You should take a look at those columns. We'll be back. I'm Dennis Prager.
This is Lon Heechen of the Hoover Institution for townhall.com. The Biden administration announced in their first week that the U.S. is rejoining the World Health Organization. But the WHO is a flawed group, one that has performed poorly while the world has struggled with COVID-19. Early on, the group was far too deferential to China, even parroting Beijing's early claim that the virus could not be transmitted between humans. Since then, an independent panel concluded that the WHO dithered in its response, waiting too long to declare an international emergency. All the while, the WHO has continued to block Taiwan's participation because of political objections from the Chinese government, despite the fact that the world has much to learn from Taiwan's exceptional response to the virus. Before rejoining the WHO, we should have demanded some accountability and reform from the group for the $400 million in taxpayer dollars we send to it each year. It looks like we'll keep on writing blank checks to the WHO, which they are more than happy to keep cashing. I'm Lan Hee Chen.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
We've seen the sausage machine from the inside. Okay. Your verdict on the first 15 days?
Full fail. Absolute, total, utter fail. Economically fail. In terms of PR, fail. Just a totally pathetic 2 weeks. The fact that Biden's big vaccine plan literally didn't exist. There's no COVID plan. He already said that that there's nothing they can do. So disaster there. Disaster on the Keystone Pipeline. His climate czar is John Kerry, who is literally like a cartoon character of a bad politician. He's the climate czar and has a private jet at the same time. Doesn't.
But it's okay. He said when he flew to Iceland to get the award, he said today, but somebody like me has to have a private jet. I'm going to use that excuse. If I get a private jet, I'm going to say, but someone like me has to have a private jet, Boris. Don't you agree?
He's so fancy, and he's achieved so much in his life. He's been such a high achieving person, you know. After serving in Vietnam, and thanks for his service, buying someone else's medals to throw out, okay?
And then testifying against our nation and the Vietnam War in the Senate.
Being a totally useless senator, a horrible candidate for president, Iran's best friend as Secretary of State, can't even ride a bicycle normally.
Well, but hang on, Boris. He did marry up.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
What we are heading towards will be one of the most violent decades in American history. Why? Massive wealth and income inequality is one reason, because of the lockdowns and because of leaders that do not care about the well-being of their subjects. A war on police officers and a war on law enforcement, and quite honestly, a war on the law in general. And also an unmanaged transition from the corporate boardroom industrial economy to the digital economy. When you have this much economic dislocation, when you have this much disruption, do not be surprised when murder rates and homicide rates skyrocket. New York City is becoming a place that is completely unrecognizable. Just some of my buddies in Chicago that I grew up with said they do not feel comfortable going to downtown Chicago. They feel their car will almost assuredly be carjacked, or whatever is in their car will be stolen. When I was in San Francisco,
here. There are a handful of groups doing great work. ADF, Alliance Defending Freedom, is one of them, and they bring cases before courts, sometimes the Supreme Court. And a senior counsel for ADF is John Bursch, B-U-R-S-C-H. And I want to talk to you, John Bursch, about the latest assault on liberty, and that is the right of 501c3s, that is nonprofit organizations, to keep donors' names private. The left is moving that they be made public. Tell me if I have this entirely right, and I will add my belief. The reason is so that they can then suppress the donors by having them ganged up on by the left on social media, etc. So, John Bursch, welcome to the show, and do I have the case accurately?
Thank you, Dennis. I'm happy to be here. And you're right. Every American should be free to support causes they believe in without fear of harassment or intimidation. And when the government compels 501c3s to give away to the government information about their donors and supporters, and there's a risk that that could be released, it causes two problems. First, donors and supporters will start to worry that they're going to get lots of requests from other charitable organizations if it's known that they're giving to this one. But more importantly, if they give to a cause that raises hot passions among people when they talk about the issues, they could end up being doxxed or harassed, whether that's online, electronically, or in person, with boycotts and personal threats of harassment. And when they do that, then they stop giving, and that's a violation of the Constitution. And so we have a case involving that very issue up in front of the U.S. Supreme Court right now on behalf of the Thomas More Law Center.
The left has nothing to lose if donors to left-of-center 501c3s are made known. Look, Soros funds radical, not just left-of-center, people like Gascon in Los Angeles, the district attorney, and pays no price for it. But if our side gives, to you, if somebody donates to ADF or to PragerU, and they can be boycotted, etc. This is the aim, correct?
Well, that's frequently what happens, and forced disclosure is a threat to anyone who gives to an organization like Thomas More Law Center that defends religious freedom and family values and the sanctity of life. And even the risk that your identity could be disclosed if your name and confidential information were publicly disclosed by the government will often cause people to stop supporting that organization. And so compelled donor disclosure hurts everyone by eliminating the funding sources for these all-important organizations that defend freedom in this country.
So what is their argument? Why is it unconstitutional, that's the argument I presume, or against American law, to enable 501c3s to keep the donor list private?
Well, they say that they've got an interest in compelling donor disclosure so that they can regulate charitable fraud. But there was a trial on this matter, and the district court found, as a matter of fact, based on the record, that the form we're talking about here, these are called Schedule Bs. It's something that nonprofits are forced to submit to the federal government as part of their tax compliance. And that's what California wants, because it shows the top donors. The district court found, as a matter of fact, that the California Attorney General's office had never once used a Schedule B to initiate an investigation, that it rarely ever needed them for any purpose. In fact, less than 1% of their investigations even involved the use of a Schedule B, and that when they actually needed the information on the Schedule B, they could easily get it simply by issuing a subpoena to that particular charitable organization, and in every case, they got it. So there was no need whatsoever for a blanket disclosure, which applies not only to charities that are located in California, but charities located anywhere in the United States. The Thomas More Law Center is in Ann Arbor, Michigan, that solicit funds to California residents. So, against that lack of an interest, you've got the First Amendment's promise of free association. And this goes all the way back more than 60 years ago when the U.S. Supreme Court said that the NAACP did not have to give up its membership list to Alabama because its members and supporters would be harassed and physically threatened by segregationists in the South.
Well, all right. That's amazing. I'll be back in a moment with John Birch of the Alliance Defending Freedom. Go to adflegal.org/Dennis. Got to be aware of what they're doing. adflegal.org/Dennis. And now, Relief Factor time. Easiest. I take it regularly. Everyone I know does, because it's very common to have some sort of ache in some muscle or joint. And what it usually is inflammation. This is a non-drug anti-inflammatory developed by doctors, and it works. Give it a 3-week trial. You'll know in 3 weeks if it works, so you just pay a 3-week price of $19.95. And that is at relieffactor.com, 800-500-8384.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
2020 was the largest percentage increase in homicides in American history. Murder was up nearly 37% in a sample of 57 large and medium sized cities. Based on preliminary estimates, at least 2,000 more Americans, most of them black, were killed in 2020 than in 2019. You would think that would be a heavy focus or primary focus for the ruling class media. The local murder increases in 2020 were as following: 95% in Milwaukee, 78% in Louisville, 74% in Seattle, 72% in Minneapolis, 62% in New Orleans, and 58% in Atlanta. A lot of people blame it just purely on the pandemic stress. Do you not remember the defund the police narrative that swept our country for months? And Minneapolis basically did defund their police. One of the reasons why some of the police officers in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol tragedy did not have lethal weapons is because some of them were disarmed by Muriel Bowser, the mayor of Washington, D.C.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
You know what I can't get out of my head? Why doesn't this woman wear a mask? They're all so mask-friendly in the White House now. Biden is often behind the Resolute desk with his mask on in the Oval Office. You know, you hardly see Biden without a mask ever. Somebody tweeted out last night, or yesterday, Jen Psaki should be wearing a mask when she does her press conferences, perhaps double masks if she wants to set a good example. If every American needs to wear a mask while working indoors, she does too. Also, isn't she on federal property? Americans demand consistency. Now, do the rules not apply to the White House press secretary? How does that work? She's standing at a podium with numerous particles coming out of her mouth as she's answering questions that she apparently has been given in advance from the White House press corps. I had my producer, who's pretty nifty at tracking things down. I said,
all right, I have one more question for my guest. And I want to remind you on a philosophical note, you know, I divide good people into three groups: those who fight, those who help the fighters, and those who do nothing. Those who do nothing is always the largest, and I always add that those who help the fighters are just as important as the fighters. And what they just want, they just want you to be aware of what they're doing. That's what I'm not even asking you for money. ADFlegal.org/Dennis. ADF, that's Alliance Defending Freedom, legal.org/Dennis. Or call 855-649-2020, 649-2020. Final question, John. And what has happened? I'm talking to John Birch about the Supreme Court case the ADF is handling, and that is the left's attempt to force all groups to reveal the names of donors, which might sound nice on the face of it, but of course we all know the reason, so that they can crush the livelihoods and reputations of those who donate to conservative causes. That's the entirety, and that's the reason. So how has this winded its way to the Supreme Court? What were lower court decisions?
Well, after a 4-day trial in the district court ruled in favor of the Thomas More Law Center and granted a permanent injunction against California's blanket disclosure rule for charitable organizations and their donor lists. That went up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which reversed, and then the U.S. Supreme Court agreed to hear the case in January. So we're likely to have oral arguments in April and a decision by the end of June.
Oh, well, the second I heard the word ninth, I knew the result.
They do not have the best track record. And again, our position is pretty straightforward, that you can't force someone to give up their donors, particularly when you're an organization like the California Attorney General's office, which leaks that information like a sieve, according to the trial court, because that violates the free association and free speech rights of the donors as well as the charitable organizations. And no one should be engaging in any government conduct that takes away supporters from a group like Thomas More Law Center, which is defending religious freedom, family values.
What was the vote in the
life.
Ninth Circuit? What was the number? Well, how did the numbers go?
The panel decision was 3-0 unanimously for California.
Wow.
And then Thomas More sought rehearing en banc, in front of a larger group of the Ninth Circuit judges, and 5 of them did dissent vociferously to say that the U.S. Supreme Court had to take this case in order to restore the undisputed First Amendment right of free
5 out of how
association and free
many?
speech. I believe it was 11 at that point.
Really? Wait.
Ninth Circuit en banc. Well, there's a lot more Ninth Circuit judges than that, but they don't all sit for rehearing en banc because there's just too many of them. It's the only circuit that does that.
So the en banc vote was 6-5?
Don't quote me on that, but I believe it was pretty close.
Well, I hope you win. Obviously, I hope you win at the Supreme Court. I'm guardedly optimistic. Anyway, thank you for your work.
Yeah, we are too. And this is part of a broader Stand for Freedom campaign that Alliance Defending Freedom has.
That's right.
To really push back on this administration and the House and the Senate, the U.S. Congress, which are looking to restrict religious liberty and family values and to destroy the sanctity of life in a variety of contexts. And so we urge all of your listeners to go to our website, given the address, adflegal.org/Dennis, to learn more about this and the other cases that we have to protect American freedom and liberty.
John, thank you for all you do. This is a great example of you're helping just by visiting the site. Okay, please know that. adflegal.org/Dennis. Can you imagine if all the donors of every organization that's obviously, imagine pro-life, and you'll see big ads. These people hate women. By the way, more women are anti-abortion than men. That's the irony here. Never. Growing up in this country, I was saying this to my producer, a.k.a. the living martyr, a.k.a. Alan Estrin, a.k.a. You have any other known as?
Only something you come up with.
Unless I come up with it. That's exactly right. Alain. That's what I came up with. Growing up in this country, when I did, baby boomer that I am, freedom, I never took it for granted because I had been to communist countries and studied totalitarianism. Nevertheless, even if you don't take it for granted, it's sort of like when you're young, you take being alive for granted, right? How many, 25, are you thinking, I'm going to die one day? You know it, but it doesn't really pervade your consciousness in any way, or your health. Wow, look at that, my legs work. Now, intellectually, you should feel that. I'm very lucky. I woke up and my legs work. I try to do that. Nevertheless, especially when you're younger, you just expect your legs to work, and they do. So in that sense, growing up in the United States until the late 20th century, freedom was like your legs working. You appreciate it, but it's just a given. You could say whatever you want in America. That's what America was about. It's the you can say whatever you want country. And now it isn't. It isn't. Before your eyes, the greatest freedom of all, there's nothing close, is dying. It's not dead. I'm speaking. If you don't fight the left or help those who fight the left, it's a bad thing.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
I ask you, those of you who engage in that stupid thought experiment after the Capitol riot, well, suppose they had been black. I got a phone call from my daughter, and my granddaughter, and she said, Pop, suppose they had been mostly black. And Biden says, nobody could tell me that the response would not have been different. Okay, nobody can tell me that America's response would not be different if President Barack Obama were impeached based upon these bogus grounds and then faced a trial after he left office, and the judge presiding over the trial dislikes him to the point where he already voted to convict and expel him from office on account when not a single Republican joined. America would be on fire, and you know it. How many times did somebody get accused of being racist simply because they opposed a policy by Obama? Now, the new lawyer, his name is Dave Schoen, says, look, here's what we're going to say. We're going to say this whole thing is unconstitutional, and it is. There shouldn't be a trial, and there shouldn't. We don't have jurisdiction. Court doesn't have jurisdiction, and they don't. But he also made the point that I made from the very beginning, and that is if Joe Biden really wanted to heal, really wanted to reach out, pick up the phone, call Schumer and say, call off the dogs because this is stupid.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Country, but I want to ask you, going back to Biden, there was an episode in the first or second season of The Crown where Churchill is quite sick, and his number two, I guess Anthony Eden, the foreign secretary, is also quite sick. You have a constitutional issue if you do not have a healthy president in our country. It seems to me that there is a sham being put over on the American people, that this is something that we haven't talked about because we don't talk about these things. The mainstream media doesn't ever want to accuse Joe Biden of being anything less than, a great athlete or something. Right. But the fact is that what we have seen makes me think it's a fact that he is not actually governing, that he has an earpiece. People are telling him what to do. People are putting things in front of him to sign.
Here's what I suspect is going to happen at some point. I really think that Kamala Harris, she is the chosen one of the power brokers of the DNC, and particularly the
Hi, everybody. I'm Dennis Prager. And I'm in this battle of my life, as it were, to sustain freedom in this country. That half of America supports the Democrats is a very, very troubling fact of life. There's no moral defense for defending the Democrats. None. It means you have willfully decided to ignore the deprivation of freedom that is taking place in this country and the smearing of America's past. Not to mention the crushing of the economy that is envisioned thanks to the truly suicidal ideas with regard to the hysterics on global warming. I had Bjorn Lomborg on earlier. Bjorn Lomborg is as involved in the climate issue as any human living. He completely agrees that the globe is getting warmer and agrees that fossil fuels play a significant role in that fact, and yet asks the only question that's worth asking: so what? Yes, we're not deniers. We deny your hysteria. We don't deny warmth. We don't deny fossil fuel contribution. We deny the hysteria that is enabling you to transform the Western world's economy, while China increases its coal production. So whilst China goes forth in making a stronger economy, and the hell with global warming concerns, we are being crushed by these plans by 2050. The costs that it will engender. Even Biden says $500 billion a year. Where are we going to get that money, my friends? Where are we going to get that money? We've just spent trillions because of the idiotic, suicidal, unmedical, unscientific lockdowns. I said they were the greatest mistake in March. And now to see that YouTube shut down doctors testifying in the U.S. Senate on behalf of ivermectin, the conspiracy to kill Americans on the part of the left, I mean this literally. They have killed, according to Dr. Risch on this program, an epidemiologist at Yale, 200,000 Americans have died because of the opposition to therapeutics. You can ignore what I'm saying, but it will come to haunt you.